Hi, I'm Nigel Bloomfield from the Happy Giraffe. Today we're going to show you how to use the spreadsheet to look forward 24 months, see your income, cover your fixed expenses, and then find a weekly allowance that works for your specific situation. We're going to start by looking at this tab called Period. This is showing how far you're going to look forward. So right here in weeks, we're going to type in 104 because we want to look forward for 2 years. You can do less or more, but this is a good place to start. The start date is going to set what day of the week you get your allowance. So Monday is an easy day to start with, but you can do any day that works for you. Also, this spreadsheet is easier to fill out if you do it on the first day of your week. So if I want my allowance to start on a Monday and I try to fill all of this out on a Friday, it's going to get a little confusing. So if you can, the first time you fill this out, do it on a Monday morning. That's all you need to worry about on this page. So now we're going to go over to income. On this page, we're looking at how much money you're going to have to work with for the next 2 years. If you get a steady salary, then this is really easy. You give it a name, and then you type in how frequently you receive that income. You can see here that you've got a lot of different options for how often you receive it. Enter in how much you take home. Your take-home amount is less than what your boss tells you that you make. And then enter the next pay date for that income. We're not including bonuses or tax returns or anything like that. If you get those, that will be a nice surprise and you can decide how to use it then. If your income isn't as steady, look over the last few months and find an average that you can put in here. The only thing you want to watch out for is guessing too high. For the bank account section, put how much you have right now to pay your normal expenses. This is usually the amount in your checking account or whatever cash you have on hand right now. You don't want to include savings in this amount. The spreadsheet is going to use this along with your income to make sure that you have enough money to pay for everything in the future. So now that this is done, we're going to look at our fixed expenses down here, and I'll make this bigger so that you can see it. This one is going to take a little more time, but it isn't that bad because you already know most of your fixed expenses. These are your bills, any debt payments you have, insurance, monthly subscriptions. Again, savings should be included here too. Remember that we're not looking at groceries or entertainment or clothing, none of that. Those are all going to come later. So these are divided into how frequently they happen. So in weekly, you can probably delete all of these. You might have a weekly donation that you make, so you could keep that, but usually this weekly stuff isn't actually a fixed expense. So now we can look over at monthly. This is where most of your fixed expenses are going to happen. Put in all of those bills that you know you have. The amount, the day of the month they are due. If you have any debt payments, put the minimum amount due in here. And then you can add an extra line for debt payoff, where you decide which debt you are going to focus on paying down. An emergency fund should also be in here, even if it's only $10. It's really important to build something up for emergencies because they are absolutely going to happen. We also like to have a buffer amount in here that we moved over to short-term savings. It's not required, but it's helpful if you have room for it. Utilities is always an interesting one because you want it here as a fixed expense, but they can change a lot over the course of a year. We combine gas and electric because they seem to move opposite of each other, and then we guess on the high end. That way when the bills come in and they're not actually this high, it's just a nice bonus for you. Over here in yearly, you won't have nearly as much, but it's helpful to remember some things like annual fees or something like car insurance. So we have 2 lines for that because it happens every 6 months or twice a year. For some of these, if you don't know exactly how much they will be, like for us, car registration is always a little different. So guess on the higher end, and just like the utilities, it's a nice little bonus when it doesn't actually cost that much. It's also nice to remember something like Christmas, that you know you're going to spend the money. It's not exactly a fixed expense, but it is nice to project that you're going to spend some amount of money on that. If we come over here to one-time expenses, these are for more advanced things. You probably don't need any of these, so we're just going to delete them. So now the spreadsheet knows your income and your fixed expenses as they are right now, and it's going to project them out for the next 2 years. And this is where the spreadsheet does the hard work and things get exciting. So now we're going to move on to Happy Money. So on the top, you're going to see your income for the next 2 years, subtract your fixed expenses for those 2 years, and divide what's left into weeks. This is what we had talked about earlier, But the reason this spreadsheet exists is because usually you can't actually spend that much money every week and still be okay. There's a cash flow issue. We don't always have the money in our bank account when we want to spend it. To give you an example, I'm going to type in this maximum weekly allowance right here, $277.88. I'm going to type it in down here for our actual weekly allowance. You can see that some of these numbers turned red. On the next tab over, we can see why. So over on the cash flow chart, this tab shows you day by day for the next 2 years what's going on with your money. This is pretty amazing. You're not going to get this on a typical monthly budget. You can see here that you're going to go into the negative several times. That's not good. That means I'm going to try to pay a bill or spend my weekly allowance, but the money isn't actually in my bank account to cover it. So let's come back over to Happy Money so we can adjust our weekly allowance. You do that adjustment in this cell right here. When you type an amount in here, these 3 other numbers are going to change. The days your account will go negative, your lowest bank balance, and if you are over or under spending. So let's put in a really low number like $100. You can see that these 3 cells are all green now, and let's see how that looks over on the cash flow chart. You can see that you don't ever go negative, but our bank account is getting really big over time. That means there's money that you could be using for your weekly allowance or to pay down your debt or to build up your emergency fund. But right now it's just sitting in your bank account. So at this point, we're going to want to go back to our Happy Money, go back and forth a little bit between adjusting your weekly allowance here to make sure that it's something you can actually live with, and going over to your fixed expenses and changing some of these amounts like the debt payoff or how much you're putting into your emergency fund. So you're trying to find that kind of a balance between those things. At first, though, you probably want to err on the side of having a bigger weekly allowance. So you might want to make these numbers a little bit smaller and then have your Happy Money, your actual weekly allowance, be slightly larger. I think we had 255 in here before. And you want to do that because anytime you don't spend this whole amount of your weekly allowance, you can always move that money over to savings or to something else. So I can show you here how we can try a few different numbers. If we try 265, I'm getting some red. I don't want that. You can see that 260 is pretty close, but we still want to make sure those are green. So 255 looks about as close as I can get right now. So at the end of this, you should have a weekly allowance with all of these cells being green over here. And you also have this cool cash flow chart that shows you day by day what your finances are going to look like. And that's all you need. You've made your budget. You're all done. You just give yourself that allowance for the week and start spending. This last tab over here, you don't even need to worry about. It's for advanced things that we're going to cover in another video. So now that you have a weekly allowance that will work for your specific situation, we want to make sure that you can track what you spend each day and make sure that you're staying within that weekly allowance. In the next video, I'm going to go over a free app we use called Good Budget that's been really helpful to track everything. It works on Android and Apple, and it makes sure that my wife and I are always up to date on how much money we have left in our allowance. So hopefully that helps explain the basics of how to use the spreadsheet. I'll see you over in the next video to show you how to track everything.